Welcome to the Pop Docs channel. My name is Joseph, one half of the Pop Docs, joined in this video with the other half of the Pop Docs, my sister Deni. Deni, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a lovely Sunday, and we went bowling earlier, had a great time, and now we're recording this. It should be great.
Yeah. Free of rain, which for this time of year in Florida seems to be somewhat surprising.
Yeah.
But this is hopefully an exciting video that will hopefully kick off an exciting series. Today we are talking about the Wheel of Time. I have it on two different shelves here. It is my favorite book series of all time, certainly then my favorite fantasy series of all time. I've read through one time, never done a reread because it just feels daunting. But you are essentially a never reader of the Wheel of Time.
I would say that.
Are preparing to jump in and have jumped in. If listeners have followed our podcast, you have been reading The Shadow Rising. I think the last video, which I believe was our Comic-Con video, which if viewers want to see, can be found here on the channel. I think at that video you're still in The Shadow Rising, if I remember
Probably. Yeah, probably.
But I received a text from you about a week ago, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago, that you have finished The Shadow Rising.
I have. I have finally finished it. Woohoo!
Woo! 4 down. Not too
Only
many
4.
left to go. But because you have embarked on your Wheel of Time journey, I thought we could do some videos getting your reaction to each of the books, beginning obviously with The Eye of the World. We're not doing New Spring. Have you read New Spring?
No, I have not. No. I was going to save that till the end because I figured that's kind of how the flow went, is that you go with the main books and then kind of circled back to that one.
That's how I've heard it, kind of colloquially done.
Yeah.
But I think do you know the gist of what that trilogy? I think it was supposed to be a trilogy, the New Spring trilogy. It was essentially a prequel series.
Yeah.
But the first book, New Spring, largely follows Moraine Land. But because it isn't finished, I think if it was finished, maybe it would be worthwhile starting there. But because it's not finished, I think it would feel very disjointed. So I think starting with Eye of the World and going forward makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But to begin and get us kind of kickstart here, I'm obviously a fan for a long time. But since you're jumping into it, what made you decide to start reading the Wheel of Time, embarking on this really long journey?
Yeah, it is a long journey. It's a commitment for sure. I decided, so I usually always have like one big series of books that I'm always reading. The one before this was probably the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind, which is my favorite actual series.
Really?
Book series. I love that one. And so after that, I was just kind of putzing around for a little bit between different, books and genres and stuff like that. But then I decided, because the TV show was coming out, I figured, why not try reading the books? I did read Eye of the World and I believe The Great Hunt back in high school, but that was so long ago. Could not even remember, really, other than like the general gist of it. Could not really remember what it was about. I do remember that I played the PC game back in the day and loved the PC game. Freaking awesome. And my husband, Rob, actually found it and got it online again. And so I've been playing that again, which is amazing.
Did you know, I think there's a PvP option, or there used to be a PvP
There used to
option?
be. I think there used to be.
Craziness. I don't think I've ever played
so
the PvP.
cool.
Did you ever do the PvP option?
I don't think so. I get really nervous about PvP situations with games. I don't know why, but I freak out about them. I'm not good at it. Let's just put it that way. And then my anxiety spikes, and it's not a fun time.
Yeah.
So I never did that, but I love the story mode, and it's so much fun to do. So I love the PC game, and I was playing that for a little bit after this TV show came on. And so, of course, I was like, oh, well, wait a minute, might as well just start reading the books again. And so I dived in, and I've obviously been thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh, well, there you go. A little foreshadowing.
Yes.
Well, and this is also so try and keep up with you. I've reread now Eye of the World through the Dragon Reborn, and I have The Shadow Rising next on my list to catch up to you. And I don't know when you're planning to start the Fires of Heaven, but this is also a good excuse for me to do a reread because every time as I mentioned, I've thought about it. It's just very daunting to go back through all of these books. Kind of new spring there again, but I'm so happy to be doing it again. Let's get into it. Get into the proper. Any expectations that you had going into the Eye of the World in particular in this video? We're strictly focusing on the first book, the Eye of the World.
In terms of expectations, I mean, I kind of had high expectations going into it again, just because Robert Jordan's so well known. His series in the fantasy realm is so well known. So I expected the first book to be pretty out of this world in terms of just, well, I mentioned world building, so I expected like that. Obviously great establishing of the characters and just this kicking off this story of really explaining who the Aes Sedai are, who, you know, these friends who end up finding themselves on a big adventure, and then you know, obviously who the big bad is, and just kind of, and obviously at the end there's this big culmination, a little battle and a skirmish, if you will. And so I expected a lot, and I've heard Robert Jordan being described as like the next Tolkien in terms of the Wheel of Time. And so I think that also added a layer of high expectation, because I'm like, if it's going to be compared to him, it better be good.
Yeah, I don't know if maybe it's both. Either the next Tolkien or at least the American Tolkien.
American Tolkien, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, maybe both. You've read the Lord of the Rings series.
Yes, I have.
I have not. But I'll have a question
What?
for you at the end. Yeah, no, I haven't.
I didn't know you never read that, but you've read The Hobbit. You've read The Hobbit, though? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started reading a long time ago, The Fellowship of the Ring, and I got to Tom Bombadil, and I couldn't do it anymore. I had to put it down. Part of it, and I think the problem was I saw the movies first, and I often have a difficult time going from movies or television adaptations then back to the books. So it's always good for me to usually it's good for me to start out reading the book and then see the adaptation, because I really feel like the Fellowship of the Ring adaptation made a struggle to get through the Fellowship. One of these days, though, I'm going to try and jump back in there, but I do want to bring that back full circle when we get to the end of this video. But just for those viewers, we are going to be spoiling the whole book. So if you haven't read The Eye of the World, go ahead and bookmark this video and come back after you have, because we are talking about pretty much everything, at least everything that we can remember from our read of The Eye of the World, beginning with the prologue, which is Lews Therin wandering the shattered ruin of his palatial estates, seemingly in the grips of madness, being taunted by some phantasm constantly, and Lews Therin walking around screaming for his wife Ilyena, I believe is her name. And ultimately, at the end of that, the phantasm seemingly removes the veil of madness from Lews Therin's eyes, and he sees what he's done. He killed his family, destroyed his house, and then he commits suicide, and in so doing creates Dragonmount, the giant mountain just outside of Tarvalon. What were your thoughts? Did you recall this prologue from your youth when you first encountered it? Or does this like, oh my gosh, what is happening?
I did not recall it from my youth whatsoever. And so when I first read it, I read, I guess these are considered like the young adult version. So they actually split Eye of the World into two. So part 1 and part 2, obviously. And so I actually read it this way. Because I found these at a used bookstore and I thought the covers looked cool. So I was like, I'm going to read it this way. So there was another prologue in this one, which I know we were briefly talking about before we started recording, about ravens and the main characters as like kids in Two Rivers and stuff like that. Really boring. Did not enjoy that. I did not enjoy that prologue whatsoever. So skip that and completely ignore that happened. So when I went, and it's also very jarring to go from that into the actual prologue that was written.
So that one was actually before the original prologue.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that would be incredibly
It
jarring.
was really jarring because you're just like time jumping like no one's business. So, but then just focused on the actual prologue. I remember reading it and being like, "Wait, this isn't what this book's about." I was like, "Who are these people that we're learning about? Luz Theron? Like, who's that? And then who's this other dude that's showing up and like taunting him and stuff like that?" And I'm like, "What is going on?" So it was kind of confusing, just having like basic knowledge of what the series is about, but then reading that. However, after the fact, reading the book and then kind of reflecting back on the prologue, I actually appreciate that they do that because you kind of get an understanding a little bit of Luz Theron and kind of this ancient battle that's been going on, forever, basically. And so you kind of get a little glimpse of that, which they don't really show moving forward, like at all. At least in the next four. Yeah, the next few books, that's the only glimpse you've really kind of gotten from Luz Theron's point of view. So.
I can neither confirm nor deny whether or not you see Luz Theron and his society, his voice, hear his voice again, see his body, whatever. I don't know.
Sure.
I remember still the first time I read it, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
I had this completely was jarring, as you said. Jumping into this, I'm like, what did I get myself into? I don't know what is happening here. I don't know who these people are. It's very confusing, and ultimately, but like you, especially after having read the whole series, but I have a greater appreciation for the prologue now, having a better understanding of the world, both in the present and in the past. And now that's the kickstarting of the story, because obviously it's the dragon, the dragon. And then Rand obviously then becomes the Dragon Reborn. So beginning with the dragon, I think, does make sense in toto. But I wonder how many people were like just completely put off by this seemingly disjointed beginning, and then you immediately then jump into the two rivers, or Endin's Field, two rivers in the show.
Right.
Before moving off the prologue, though, any disappointment in the fact that we haven't seen that in the show yet? Spoilers for the show. Everyone watching, if you haven't watched the show, we are probably going to talk a little spoilers from the first season of Wheel of Time. But we did not get that prologue in the show.
No, I actually think it was smart that they didn't include it in the show because, I mean, if it's a little confusing at first or jarring in a book, I can only imagine if you saw it in a show, these two characters seemingly who are very different, who you don't even see again until maybe later. But like, I just don't know how they would have done it seamlessly in a way that viewers wouldn't get lost. Unless, of course, you're someone who has read the books and would be expecting that kind of prologue. I think they would lose like a casual viewer who's just like, this show looks cool, and then watch it. I think they would just throw them off track a little bit and a little confusing.
Yeah, I definitely don't think it should have been the first thing. I was not a big fan of the cutscene, the video game cutscene of Moraine monologuing and introducing the world. But I also don't think that this would have worked. I think it would have been incredibly jarring, completely out of left field. I do wonder if they could have included it somehow. So I like the episode 8 cold open, which is Luz Theron and Latra Pozai, I think is her name. Both Aes Sedai, debating in the nursery about what to do about the Dark One. So I was wondering, I thought maybe you could have that as a cold open and a separate cold open after that, the one that's from the book, the prologue. And then it would also then introduce Ashamael, Balsamon. And then you could tell, then all of a sudden the audience would be like, oh my god, the guy has been around for 3,500 years or whatever it was. You find out, because he's obviously the one in episode 8.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you think we'll get a version of the prologue if the show runs long enough? Do you think that... I wonder if they're going to continue to have like one of these cold opens be devoted to like the past in some regard, as it's thematically related to the current season.
I would hope so, that they would eventually do something to kind of help pay off what Rand ends up getting told about him being Luz Theron, and Lanfear constantly calling him Lews Therin. Like, I just hope there's, like, maybe at least one flashback, kind of like the prologue, that kind of helps just explain that a little bit more and just shows that juxtaposition of, like, the past of Lews Therin and Rand, who he's supposed to be, like, the Lews Therin reborn. It just kind of helps connect the dots a little bit. And I think they can do that, you know, after a certain amount of time is established with Rand and what he's going through and stuff. And I think it'll help break up a little bit of Rand complaining about him, like going through this and stuff.
Well, we haven't gotten, in the books we haven't gotten to Lews Therin other than...
We have not, no. Yeah, no.
The only reason I don't think they will is because they have an Origins episode. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Oh, that's
Origins
true.
episodes.
They were having those origin
Yeah, and one of them is basically Lews Therin stumbling around the ruins of his palace or estate or whatever it is, and then basically creating Dragon Map. I would prefer to have seen that in live action.
Sure.
The Origins, but the Origins, they're okay. I actually did a video like ranking the Origins. Some of them were really good, really interesting. Others I thought really boring. But enough of the show for the moment. Back to the book. The world. So we're done with the prologue. We're moving forward in time. Dragon Mount is now belching lava and ash and everything. And we are in Emond's Field in the Two Rivers. And this is where we meet our principal cast, the ones that will be colloquially known as the Emond's Field Five. Rand is coming to town with his father Tam. It's Beltane. There he hangs out with his friends Matt, who is a scoundrel and a rogue and always up to hijinks. Getting into hijinks? Are you up to hijinks? Do you get into hijinks? Whatever the proper phrase is. Perrin is the apprentice of the blacksmith. Egwene is the daughter of the couple that owns the inn. And Nynaeve is the village wisdom. Very similar stuff as in the show. And they are interacting. We see that they are friends. There seems to be something between Rand and Egwene.
Totally.
They're all pretty young. I think they're like late teens. I think they're still supposed to be teenagers in the novels. And so one thing I know you've complained about in so far as you write is the way that Robert Jordan writes romance.
Oh my gosh.
They're basically teenagers. It's teen romance. It's kind of YA romance in a lot of respects. And I can see how that can get kind of grating after a while. But that's why I always thought I thought the show does a lot better where they're just in a relationship. It really felt like, especially in the first book, that they like each other, but they're still very shy around each other, and they're not willing to really take the next step and express how they really feel.
I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with the characters feeling like giving off kind of teenage vibes, like nervousness and stuff like that. I get that, but I cannot accept that 3 men are all so bashful and shy around, seemingly beautiful women. Like, there has to be, like, some kind of knowledge of, like, hormones racing a little bit and, like, wanting to, I don't know, kiss a girl or something.
Yeah,
but they come
Harry
off
Potter number
so
6.
awkward. Yes, they just come off so awkward. Like, they don't even know how to talk to a girl, which is fine, but like at the same time, like they're obviously been friends, like they can talk a little bit. It's just Robert Jordan cannot write romance, in my opinion. I've read 4 of the books. I know we're only on the first one, but 4 books in, I'm like, there better be more time. But although it seems like they kind of get polyamorous going on later, so I don't know, Robert Jordan, what are you feeling?
No spoilers what's to come.
But yeah, that's my big rant on that. Is like, they can be a little awkward,
like though, regardless of its believability, I have always thought, even on the reread, I thought it was still pretty funny that each of them always thinks the other ones are really confident.
Yes.
And have this bravado that allows them to talk to him, and they each have the same thought, like, oh, if only Matt was here, or only if Perrin was here. I think he uses that a little too often. It gets a little rote after a while, but the initial few times that happens, I actually chuckled, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah. That is funny at first, but yeah, they continue to do it though, and I'm like,
yeah,
some of them can be a little more.
So the big question though for this sequence is in the book. So most of the book is from Rand's point of view. He is the main POV character. We get a couple chapters with Nynaeve as the POV, I believe, and a couple chapters with Perrin as the POV, and then a very small snippet within a chapter of Moraine as the POV at the very end of the book. But because Rand is the POV for especially the first part of the story, we don't actually see the Trolloc attack on Devon's Field during bell time. We are with Rand and Tam, and then Tam gets injured, and then Rand is dragging him through the woods in a litter to take back to Nynaeve to get healed, only to come upon Emond's Field. There are houses in ruin, there are houses smoking, there are injured. Moraine is seemingly running around healing people. But it turns out that there seemed to be some kind of sense to the Trolloc attack, that they were targeting specific houses. I guess it wasn't Perrin's house, but the blacksmith where Perrin was apprenticing, Matt's house, I think were the two main targets. What did you think about this approach to it? Not showing the reader the battle and actually following Rand this whole time as he's taking his father through the woods. Do you think it worked? Would you have preferred to see the battle?
I don't. It's interesting as I sit and think about it a little bit, because I kind of can see where maybe Jordan was coming from, is, getting the reader more into Rand and his story with Tam, because I think that's also when Tam starts to kind of hallucinate a little bit and starts revealing some of those memories, which has Rand questioning, like, who am I? Who's my father? Are you my father? And so I think that's
like. Are you my father?
Nothing like. But I think what I could kind of appreciate is the mystery that's still held about like the Trollocs and the evil. And so that you don't see that battle first, so you're still kind of like, oh my gosh, but I want to know more about like these Trollocs and like what you hear about them and see the evil, but you just see the destruction that they left in their wake, kind of thing. So I kind of don't mind it. I kind of like it. Yeah. So.
Well, so I think I like it from the sense that, for Rand, his like Emond's Field is the hope. It's the salvation. If he can just get there, everything will be put right, and then. So holding the reveal to he gets there and he's exhausted and he gets there and oh my god, it's in tatters, it's destroyed. So it was also attacked, because obviously we don't know that it was also attacked until he gets there. And so I like it from that perspective. I still would have liked to have seen the battle.
Something.
And it would also have given us insight into someone else's mind, give us another POV. And I think you just, for whatever reason, you wanted to follow Rand the whole time. Did you know, or were you? Maybe you knew because you had a little foreknowledge of the story that when he was taking Tam through the woods and Tam had the fever dream and was telling him all these different stories that really basically implied that he was not his son, his biological son. Did you think then and there he was the dragon, that the mystery is over? We know who it is, the dragon reborn.
Kind of. Yeah. There's always like
not having caught on to that.
if someone, someone's parents aren't really their parents, then obviously they're the like I always just feel like that's cliche, kind of the given. Yeah, that's kind of the given cliche. Like, oh, they're really not who they are. They're basically adopted. Like, okay, well then clearly there's some massive hero that's gonna save the world.
So then did you like what the show did? Where the show made it more of a mystery, and then they actually, the show held off the fever dream until I think the 7th episode, when they revealed who Rand was the Dragon Reborn. Did you like that approach the show took?
I did. I think from just from like a show perspective, kind of keeping that mystery that long for viewers, I think had people watching a little bit longer and made a bigger impact. Let's put it that way, so that you weren't like, because she based Moiraine in the show basically says like it could be any of you who could be it. I kind of liked that feeling of like, well, who could it possibly be? It's like 3 men but also 2 women who could potentially have like this enormous power like that. I think that was a cool approach to do, and keep you guessing versus just being outright like, oh, it's clearly him.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I like the idea of a mystery, a season-long mystery, to keep non-book readers guessing. But I think it ultimately detracted from several of the characters, specifically Rand, because it seemed like they were really trying to downplay that he's special in any kind of way. The one little kind of The implication we got was when he knocked down the door. He hit the door really hard. It fell over. But
Really,
outside
really
of that,
hard.
like everybody else had like their big moment to shine, which was, I think was meant to try and direct attention. Like, oh, that must be the dragon. Oh, that person must be the dragon. Oh, that must be...
Sure.
And so I think Rand really faded to the background as a character. And other MMS5 members tended to fade, I think, too. So I think it's one of those things in concept, I think, made a lot of sense. I'm ambivalent about whether or not it worked in practice. But that's a debate for a video that's focused on the show. We're focused here, clearly, as we keep deviating, or at least I keep deviating to the show, to talk about the show and book comparisons.
Well, like you said, it's hard not to compare when a show has come out to make comparisons. So.
Yeah, so let's talk about something that I think the books did incredibly well when compared to the show, which is how they end up leaving Emond's Field, leaving Two Rivers with Moraine and Lan. Moraine and Lan has shown up, and interestingly here in this, she gives each of them, the boys, a coin, a special coin, that ultimately we find out allows her to track them in a general sense, to kind of know in what general direction the boys are. But in the show, she just tells everybody in the village, including the kids, hey, one of you is the Dragon Reborn. We got to get out of here. And the parents are like, just looked sorrowfully towards them as they rode off on horses.
They're
no
like,
one
"Oh,
said
okay."
anything. No one gave any pushback.
Just take our children. It's fine.
Yeah, it was
She's
so
Aes Sedai.
rushed.
It's fine.
It made no sense. So that's why I loved in the books. Like there was a lot more subterfuge. It was much more clandestine. She just gathered them up one night, and then under the cover of darkness, they fled Emond's Field. After she gives a very rousing, no, I guess it's not rousing, a very kind of somber retelling of Manetheren. I think it was about Manetheren to the villagers because they were amassing. I believe they were amassing kind of in a mob to confront her, thinking that she had something. Even though she apparently she saved the little village. Anyway, they flee, and so did you like the way that happened? I thought it was a much better, much more logical way that this would happen, and it really, I think, instilled, at least certainly for the reader, certainly for me, the stakes of what it meant to be the Dragon Reborn. That it's not a good thing to be the Dragon Reborn. It might be a necessary thing according to the prophecies, but it's not something you wish on anybody. And it's a secret that needs to be kept even from family members, and that we can't have even family members knowing what we're going to do. At least they have to let us go. I mean, I think they all left letters for their loved ones before they fled. And Egwene jumps on. So that is one of the show changes, that it's only one of the boys who be the Dragon Reborn. But Egwene joins, and then ultimately we see Nynaeve follows after them and meets up with them on the path.
To drag them back. But
To drag them back.
Yep.
Back to the Emond's Field.
Basically,
I'm going to switch you. There's a lot of switching, I think, in the Wheel of Time. Isn't that like one of the punishments? They just switch people.
Yeah, switch people.
Make them
It's
go-
a different
make them go
time.
Find a switch out in the
That
field.
was allowed. Yeah, I mean, I preferred the book's way. It just added also like a level of urgency almost, of having to leave, of having to flee and get away, to also, protect the village. Yeah, I liked it. It got a little more suspenseful as well. So you became a little more like, oh shit, they gotta escape in the cover of darkness and tell no one. Dun dun dun.
And there's still
What's gonna come next?
Trollocs.
And yes, and the flying bat thing. What are those things called?
Drag car. I call them drag car. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced or not. I'm hoping they show up in the show, because the drag car I thought were always terrifying.
Ooh, they sound terrifying. Yeah, they sound really scary. Not a fun time.
Yeah.
But they encounter one of those when they're fleeing.
Yeah. And so they're like their flight from between Emond's Field and Shadar Logoth, I think it's like a few weeks. I mean, they're on the road fleeing Shadowspawn for a while. And they go to Terran Ferry, they go to Barillon, which we don't.
Yep.
That's a change from the book to the show. But in Barillon, we met Min. Min's just hanging in an inn in Barillon with Moraine, and they're like in a hallway. At least I always envision like a hallway, and it's almost like The Shining, that Moraine and Min are at the end of this hallway as the boys and Egwene show up, and they're just standing there. And I always imagine Moraine like her hand on Min's shoulder, and Min reading them all and seeing the symbols, and then whispering up to Moraine. I don't know if that's actually how it happened, but that's how I've always depicted it.
Yeah,
And
it's probably close.
but yeah, so that's one of the big things in Barrelon is meeting Min, getting to know Min a little bit, and then Matt, being the prankster that he is, he and Rand end up pranking a bunch of White Cloaks, so we get our first interaction with the White Cloaks. And I can't remember if it's Child Buyer or not. I don't know if you remember, but that's one of the or Child Buyer, I think, who is a White Cloak we see
Yeah.
going
However
forward.
you pronounce his name. I don't know how to pronounce names.
But
So.
you can tell the way he wrote them. They're haughty, they're arrogant, they think that they represent the light, and they just push people all the way. Like right from the start, I mean, you're just like you're sick of these people already. At least I was. Like, oh God.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, mainly for Perrin and Egwene, it's going to come back to bite them that they played a prank on these White Cloaks. And then the third thing, if I remember correctly, is Padden Fane is seen. So I didn't mention Padden Fane. The peddler who was in Two Rivers in Emmonsfield before the Trolloc attack.
Yep.
He's seen once again in Barrelon, but now he's like in this kind of in these beggar's clothes, and he seems a little crazed. And Rand sees him. Don't worry, he shows back up. We're not losing Padden Fane. But we then keep moving. They have to flee Barrelon. They're basically forced to flee before they want to. There's this weird scene where Moraine gets really large and to intimidate and scare.
I completely forgot that was a thing.
Well, it's because it never happens again. It's a power, a usage of the one power that I don't believe ever was used, spoiler, for the rest of the series. And I've heard people talking about this, and this is really, especially book one, it really seems like Robert Jordan wasn't exactly sure what could and could not be done with the one power. He was still forming the one power as he was writing this one. So there's, some of the stuff that happens in this book and never happens again. This is one of them where she becomes like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He's really tall and like walks over the walls of Barrelon and then shrinks again. It was giant Moraine, yeah.
That is terrifying. That's a terrifying thought.
Giant anyone, especially in that world. Probably, like I guess even in our world, giant. I mean, if Stay Puft Marshmallow Man came walking down the street, I'd be terrified.
Yeah.
But anyway, they left Barrelon and they're still fleeing, and they end up in Shadar Logoth, or Shadar Logoth, or Shadar Logoth. I don't know. There's many pronunciations of Shadar Logoth. And then just to wrap it up quickly before we kind of move into Act 2 of the story, the boys end up investigating Shadar Logoth despite Moraine and Lan's
just wander off
warnings.
in a dead city and that's known to be haunted, and like with the Trollocs don't even go in there. But they still, you know what? Let's just take a little walk. Let's see what we can find. No big deal.
There could be treasure. They're going to treasure. Nice to die, warning it.
It's okay.
He's being dramatic. I don't know. Maybe he's exaggerating the problem. And then they run into a creature or a person called Mordeth.
Mordeth. Yep.
I can't remember if Mordeth tells them his name is Mordeth or their name is Mordeth or whatever or not. If it did, that might have been a red flag.
I feel like he did, because I'm pretty sure later in the book, when they tell Moiraine we encountered blank we met blank and he took us to the gold or whatever, and she was like, "You what?" I'm pretty sure literally her reaction was like, "You met who?"
Now you've talked to Mordeth?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was like, "What the?"
Kids, just listen to me. Listen to the adult in the room. Please.
Yeah. Which again, a random stranger who I believe was dressed really nicely, if I recall correctly, just mysteriously, magically appears out of nowhere and is like, "Hey, come on down this way. Let me show you what I found." You don't do it.
Which is every way, whenever the devil is portrayed as some conniving, cunning swindler, it's seemingly how they always appear is dressed really nicely with a slick tongue. Yeah.
I don't care how young and naive you are. There's just some things that you get vibes off of.
In our youth, okay? But by the grace of God, there go I think is the phrase. But either way, they screw it up. They do find a room full of gold. They're lit to it.
Yep.
And somehow Mordeth like gets sucked into the walls. And I think I can't remember if it's because before or after Matt touches the dagger, but this is where he gets the ruby hilted dagger that is cursed.
Yep.
And unbeknownst to everybody, he grabbed this thing, and it's ultimately going to like sucking his life away. But he just becomes a moodier and moodier teenager, basically. So it just makes him more of a modern day teenager.
Yes.
In temperament, but they're ultimately then like this triggers Shadar Logoth, and they need to get the hell out of there, or they are all going to be living there permanently with more death hanging out in Shadar Logoth, succumbing to what the Trollocs fear, and so this ultimately leads them all getting separated, and so. Well, we have Rand, Matt, and Tom. I completely forgot Tom Maryland this whole time. But Tom Maryland, the Gleeman, is with him this whole time. He was in, and a big bit changed from the books. He's in Emmons Field, and he goes with. And he's like, he's the voice telling the kids like, don't trust Aes Sedai. You cannot trust Aes Sedai. Don't trust Moraine. Aes Sedai are always going to lie to you, even though it sounds like the truth. Blah blah blah. But he gets separated with Rand and Matt. It's Perrin and Egwene, and then it's Lan, Moraine, and ultimately Nynaeve. And they're all in different places. They all are supposed to meet up at Whitebridge, which is a town that is connected by
a giant white bridge.
it's aptly named Whitebridge. And so that's ultimately what they're going to attempt to do in their own ways.
Yeah.
Before we get to that act, any thoughts on
Shadar Logoth?
Barillon, did you like those sequences? You like Shadar Logoth?
I did. I could have done without Barillon section. It did, other than the introduction of Min. I was like, there's not a lot here. I mean, you get to meet the White Cloaks a little bit, but like it wasn't anything mind blowing. I did like the Shadar Logoth chapters. I just think, I mean, it's just a cool place. Like how it's, the gates to like the Forsaken and stuff. I think that's just so cool, and how dark it is, like how evil it is. I love the description of it, how Robert Jordan lays it out. It's just like pin drop silent. There's nothing. You get this sense of like this grand city at once, but it's just like desolate now, but you can like feel the evil vibes. Like, I just think that's so cool. And then when, is it a shadow or a fog? I forget what the actual essence is that like goes after them. I
think it was like a shadow or a cloud.
I think it was like a dark shadow or something. Yeah. But I just love that idea of like the evil just lives and breathes and can literally like consume you in the city. Is just so cool to me. I'm like, I love horror stuff to begin with, so like dark evil things like that. It's just fascinating to me. And very cool. And I thought it was interesting
in Wheel of Time. I mean, all the way from the Shadow Spawn to Shadar Logoth to the Ways.
Yeah,
it is a lot of. He's seemingly inspired by a lot of different horror kind of tropes or creatures.
Scary creatures, yeah. Some scary creatures, scary scenes, scary places. Just lots of scary stuff. But I love the description of like when the Trollocs actually are like forced into the city, and they're like, oh, no. Like even the Trollocs don't want to go, but the Murdroll are like, get the fuck in there. Like, you gotta go in there and get them.
Damned kids.
Yeah, I think it's so cool.
I would have survived Shadar Logoth too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
Basically. And plus, I think because I played the PC games and the Shadar Logoth scenes were like so terrifying in that game. They were so scary. I think it's just reading it in description and then like thinking through the PC game, it was just great. It may have been like my favorite part of the first book, I think, probably.
Really? The Shadar Logoth sequence?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just because I loved that part in the game so much because it was so freaky and terrifying, and then reading it in the books as like another experiencing of that city, it's just so cool to me.
That is one of the things I wish in the show would have felt a little like claustrophobic. I thought the shadow creeping thing that was eating the horse and whatnot was I thought it was a good representation of what
I think so.
Mordeth is or what the evil is.
Yeah. It's what I could picture it being. Like, it's what I kind of pictured it.
I
So,
just pictured it falling apart, obviously, but also just like perpetually dark, like it's perpetually nighttime. I don't think that was
yeah.
how it was at all, but that was how I always pictured it. It was just always this like shadowy enclosure, no matter where you
Yeah.
went in the city, and it was just claustrophobic the whole time. But apparently full of riches for the wayward adventurer to find.
Of course.
But they all survived. Shockingly, everybody survived, at least from our contingent. The Emmonsfield Five, Tom, Myrain, and Lamb, but they're all split up now. And so
Yep.
SparkNote's version of the three storylines is they're ultimately all going to meet back up in Caneland. They don't meet up in Whitebridge. That does not succeed, that initial plan. But Tom, Rand, and Matt, I have to get all these three things in my mind again. They do make it to Whitebridge, where they are accosted by a Murdral, and Tom basically sacrifices himself to allow Rand and Matt to leave. Rand and Matt then have this Odyssey-like adventure to Caneland, where they visit several different towns. I forget. I want to say at least three, but maybe it was more than three. And in most of them, I think they encounter Dark Friends the whole time.
I think so.
This is also where they get locked up in one of the towns by a Dark Friend. And they've gone to recruit other Dark Friends or Murdral to come and get them. And Rand channels lightning and just obliterates the Dark Friends. And then then we start to see him suffering from the sickness that you get for the first time channeling, or one of your first times channeling. Another marker that he is a male channeler at a minimum, and the Dragon Reborn most likely. And of course, Matt continues to become more sullen and more cranky the further along they get.
It's that dagger.
Suffering from the dagger. So they're not having a good time. Rand
No,
and Matt are just like a wreck.
That
This whole
storyline
journey.
sounds, it's just so sad. Like, they're just going from inn to inn. Rand's playing Tom's instruments and just like depressed because Tom's
the relic of a-
assumingly dead.
They're like a dead guy. But
They have no
he's still-
money.
Tom is
They're
still
like,
earning them some room and board, though. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
even in his death.
yeah, they have no money. They're like living paycheck to paycheck. Ugh, sounds like a terrible, terrible way to
They have
go.
Dark Friends. I will say this storyline got a little monotonous for me.
A little bit, yeah.
And I didn't initially, when I was reading this in my youth, I did not initially catch the casting of the lightning and then the one power
The sickness. Yeah.
It was obvious to me now as an adult reading this, also hearing commentary. What I did like, the one thing I did like about this storyline was I think it really revealed the danger of Dark Friends, that they could just be anywhere. And they are
that's
seemingly
cool.
everywhere. I mean, they keep encountering these people. And so at least I think this raised the stakes for them, because I don't think the other two storylines really had the same danger lurking. And this is how I've heard some people characterize the show too, is it almost seemed like Rand and Matt in the show were in their own horror movie, which was like completely different
good way to
than the
put
other two tracks that were different, like more kind of high epic fantasy storylines. But Matt and Rand are constantly being harassed by Shadow Spawn and Dark Friends. By the way, I thought Dana, the Dark Friend in the show, was extraordinary. I thought the actor was great. I thought it was a well-written character. And I was actually grateful that they only had them really go to one place, one village, and then they just cut ahead. That was the time jump I was okay with. Because in the books, I remember getting I found it a little tedious every time we jumped back to that.
Yeah, it dragged on a little bit.
Another town, yeah. But what did you think about it? Did you like their flight across Andor? I think it's Andor. It reminds me of the show. Come on, season 2. Sorry.
I did. I mean, I kind of had a similar feeling of, I think it dragged on a little bit. I mean, I can understand trying to tell the passage of time and kind of all their different experiences that they're going through. I did like, them seeing the different Dark Friends and how they can be portrayed differently. But, I mean, it dragged a little bit here and there. You know how Mr. Jordan can get super descriptive in things, and like multiple pages on, Rand reminiscing about Tom and how he's gone.
I was
like
really
50
sad
pages.
when he died. Well, when he died, I really like Tom, and I like his show counterpart too. I like both the Toms. And so when he bowed out. I was very sad. And I forgot to mention, they meet Bail Doman, the boat captain, who becomes a
Yes.
fairly integral player, certainly in the next book. But
Yeah, later on, he does come into play, which is kind of cool. I like that kind of continuation of characters down the line. But yeah, so I think it was okay, but I wish it was a little shorter.
yeah. Well, let's turn to Pegway. So Pegway,
Penguin.
SparkNotes version, they're lost and hungry. They come across this fellow with golden eyes, living seemingly friends and palling around with wolves, named Elias. Elias.
Elias?
I think it's Elias.
Elias.
Well,
At least that's how I pronounce
Ariel
it, which
watched
is
season
always
2,
wrong.
and
So
it's going to be some other pronunciation. We'll go with Elias for now. I always call him Elias.
well, I mean, the way they spell it is kind of funky, and it makes you question, like, is it
Yeah.
Elias or is it Elias or yeah.
I love this guy though. I love this character.
Oh my gosh, he's so cool.
The story. And
He's so different.
Yeah, and I really felt his absence in the show, even though we're getting him in season 2. But I thought he was a needed counterweight to pair in with the Tinkers, because obviously they are kind of in the story as they did in the show, setting up Perrin's internal tension between violence or pacifism. And when is, maybe it's a spectrum, when is violence justified, when is it not justified? And especially in the show, I thought the show did a poor job of this, is they only presented the way of the leaf, I thought. And there was no counterweight to provide the other side of the argument. Because they have been fleeing Shadow Spawn. Are you going to tell me that these characters are going to follow the way of the leaf in the face of Shadow Spawn? No. That is unbelievable to me. So it was nice to have, I loved in the books having Elias's perspective, not only as a wolf brother and kind of helping usher Perrin into that brotherhood, but to also be the counterweight to the Tinkers. It's also here where we meet Aram, and I think you've now gotten a little more of Aram in the Shadow Rising.
I did.
I don't think he's a polarizing character. I think people have strong feelings about Aram. He's clearly infatuated with Egwene, and Egwene doesn't seemingly return the feeling. So ultimately, they leave.
He's a very. There's just something about the Tinkers in general about how
What do you think about him?
sensuous they could be, so promiscuous they could possibly be. Oh my gosh, the way they,
And if you have the song, oh my goodness, be top Tinker.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you will be praised. No, I mean just the way they describe like how the females like hug and kiss a lot, and also dance quite
Party every night around the
promiscuously. Yes, I'm just like, oh, these Tinkers, they're not violent, but they're something else.
Yeah, and I love that Elias has a relationship with that particular like pack of Tinkers. Oh, it's Elias again. Oh yeah.
They're like, hey.
He just feels, he's almost like of a noise. Like, I'm gonna have to hear again that I shouldn't be using violence. Blah blah blah. I've got to go through the motions here again. But it's also interesting because I believe this is where we hear them tell Perrin and Egwene the story of I think it was the Aiel that they came across, or another group of Tinkers came across, and they mentioned the Eye of the World. So this is one of the mentions of the Eye of the World, because we get several mentions of it throughout the book.
Yeah.
Which becomes important later on in the story. But ultimately, they depart. So Elias, Perrin, and Egwene depart the Tinkers, and Aram is also left behind, much to his disappointment, and probably cast him into teenage depression, I guess, because his first breakup with Egwene.
Yes.
And then they end up encountering White Cloaks, and the White Cloaks essentially, I believe, chase them into a steading, or they go through a steading or something, and they end up in an altercation with the White Cloaks. Elias gets injured, a lot of wolves are there, they get injured, Perrin wolfs out, essentially, and he kills, I believe, 2 White Cloaks. But ultimately, he's subdued by the White Cloaks, and they're captured by, I believe, Jeffrey Bornhold, Child Bornhold, Commander Bornhold, I think his captain, I forget exactly. Who's actually, I always thought he was a fairly reasonable White Cloak, even though White Cloaks, on a whole, are pretty despicable.
He seems to follow their
but among White
rules
Cloaks,
a little bit.
He's one of the better White Cloaks. Because he basically wants to take Perrin to Amadisia, which is where they essentially hold rule, and try him for the crime of killing White Cloaks. And they think anyone that's affiliated with wolves are Shadow Spawn. so they also think they're dark friends
Sure.
as well. Which is, all of this is a complete change in the show. The show conceives of this whole interaction differently. And I actually like it. It makes a lot more sense to me in the books than it does in the show. So I thought the books did a much better job with Perrin and Egwene's storyline on a whole host of different things. First beginning with Elias in the story, as well as the whole White Cloak encounter.
Yeah.
Because, we'll turn it over real quickly to you, because this is where we end up having the other storylines. Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve are together, and they eventually find Perrin and Egwene captured by White Cloaks, and they conceive of a plan to rescue Perrin and Egwene. Mm-hmm. And long story short, unsurprisingly, the plan succeeds. And so they're all back together, and then they're on their way to Caemlyn. Rand and Matt are on their way to Caemlyn, and ultimately they're going to meet again in Caemlyn. But before we get there, thoughts on Perrin and Egwene, on Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve, and then which of the three was your favorite storyline to follow, if you had one?
I mean, Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve's was...
They didn't do much. I mean, they were kind of
They
just
didn't really...
following.
Yeah, it's like, they're just trying to find them, basically. And Moraine's like, I can, because they have the coins.
The magic
So,
coins.
and Nynaeve's just pissed 24/7.
It is nice because you get in her head, so you see her from her point of view, and she just does not like Moraine. And
Yeah,
Moraine,
she does.
Moraine's like basically trying to influence her and pressure her into becoming a nice guy. You can change.
Yeah.
I think you've got the skill.
You can do it. And Nynaeve's like, I just fucking hate you. And she, but you can still do it. And meanwhile, she's also like, but Lan, he's a good-looking gent. So, not a lot going on over in that
Okay, so I think
area.
that's number 3 if you're ranking.
That would be
Just
the
'cause nothing
lowest.
happened, really.
That would be the lowest on the list. I would probably say that Perrin and Awen's is probably second on the list. Just, I mean, it was good, but Perrin kind of drove me crazy with his inner monologue for a while with his, battle with the wolves and like violence versus being peaceful.
You got no time for it.
I mean, I
Except
don't
that you're a wolf,
mind
brother.
it.
Get the axe.
I don't mind it. It's just he fights it for so long, and I understand it's like kind of out of the blue and a wild concept to comprehend, and then there's probably a fear of like asking himself internally, am I a dark friend? Like, I don't know. Just met this weird ass dude who can talk to wolves. And he seems kind of out there. So I can understand
He lives on
it.
his own out in the woods.
Yeah, I can
With a bunch of
understand
wolves.
it, but I thought it was, I don't know, there was time. Perrin in general drives me crazy with just his like non-committal inner monologue with anything. And so he just seems super naive and like not.
Well, he's a teenager. He's a young
I
guy.
can't accept that. I can't accept that.
He's the gentle giant, and he's afraid of his giant.
I guess.
side.
I guess. Sure. Sure. But
What about Egwene? Egwene was she was there.
she was there, but I don't know. They just bickered a lot in the beginning, and then they kind of came together. The White Cloaks were interesting. Anytime the White Cloaks show up, they're just, because, they're just this radical religious faction, basically. And so anytime there's a scene with them, you're just like, wow, this is such a, intense moment with them, because they're just intense people.
Yeah. Let's realize I'm not going to Amadicia. Wherever that is that they hold sway, where they rule
Heck
nothing.
no. Heck no. Especially as you learn more about, like, different individual ones and stuff. And it's just, they're a scary group. And so, I mean, it was, that storyline would probably be second to me. But I think Rand and Matt's was the most interesting, just because of all their different experiences. All of that combined, I think, just made for a more interesting path that they took.
If I had to do it in total, if I was just taking them all on their own, I'd do probably Rand, Egwene, and then Moraine, Lan, and Nynaeve. If I could break it up, I would do the parts with Tom, number 1, then Perrin and
interesting.
Egwene, number 2, the rest of Rand and Matt, number 3, and then Lan, Moraine, and Nynaeve, number 4.
Okay.
Because I love Tom. Tom
That's
is
a
one of my
good,
favorite
that's a
characters.
good one. Oh yeah,
And
he's hilarious.
Dale Doma was
He's
great too.
funny. He's such a complex
He's
character,
always
as
blowing out his
you come to
mustaches.
know. His little mustaches.
So,
His
but we
cape.
get to his home. I don't know if it's technically his hometown, but it's where he ends up spending. He spent a lot of his early life. Camelin, everyone's back. The gang's back together, and they meet in Basil Gill's humble establishment, where they also meet Loyal. This is where we meet Loyal in the books.
I love
One of the
L'Oreal.
best adaptations. I mean, he's one of the best parts of the show. It's like a perfect, I think, adaptation of Loyal in so many different ways.
I agree.
And he's such a fascinating character. And I just love that he kind of gets sucked into their orbit. Someone maybe that's Taveran power, exercising its influence on the planet. But this
Yes.
poor guy is just out to see the world, and all of a sudden he gets sucked into this quest to save the world, and he's being chased by Shadowspawn. But it's a little bit ahead of us because Rand and Matt show up first, and Matt is in bad shape. Like, he doesn't even leave the room that they get, and he's just descending further into his own internal darkness due to the dagger. And I don't think Rand knows I can't remember if Rand. I think he's seen him like flash the dagger, but Rand I don't believe has tied the two things together. But Matt is just basically comatose. So Rand goes out to see the city, and Logain is going through. So Logain, the false dragon that was captured, is being paraded around the world on their way, the Aes Sedai contingent that is taking him back to Tar Valon to be tried and gentled. And he is there, this contingent's there, this procession's there while Rand is there, and he goes out to see the dragon. And Logain, I can't remember in the book, I think he's pretty maniacal in the book and kind of mad as they're going through. But he's having difficulty seeing over the crowd despite the fact that he's Aiel, and so he's taller than everybody. And so he's looking for high ground. He's trying to get the Obi-Wan Kenobi high ground to see Logain. And so he's able to walk and find and climb this wall overlooking where the procession is going by, and he falls in behind, like falls backward, and he falls into like the palace gardens where the royal family of Andor lives. And my first thought was like, how is he able to just sit on the wall of the palace? I feel like there'd be a sentry or something like, get off there. That's really bad English. Get off. You're not allowed up there. No, I'm like Australian. I'm in the
happening?
But I'm pretty sure that's how it happens. He falls into like the palace gardens where he's discovered by Elaine and Gawain Tracan, beginning Elaine's infatuation with Rand. Like on first sight, she's just taken with Rand. And this carries over, as we'll talk about in future videos of future books. She just is so smitten. It's like all she can think about is Rand al'Thor. But they get dragged. He gets dragged before the Queen, Elaine's mother, Queen Morgase.
Yep.
Elaita's there. Elaita, the Red Sister, who has the power, I think, of foretelling. I think she sees visions sometimes of what's to come. And she sees a vision that's pretty horrific when Rand shows up. And so she thinks this guy is bad news. And but ultimately, oh, I hear Banksy, the cat.
Yeah, he's meowing back here.
But ultimately, I forget exactly, he gets out of it. He's released on his own recognizance from the palace, and he goes back to the inn, and eventually they run into Moraine and everybody else. They're all there.
Yep.
And Moraine is shown Matt, and then we are now in The Exorcist, and she has to exorcise the demons of Shadar Logoth, but we don't see it. She basically closes the door and gets their holy water out and whatnot, and is able to basically stabilize Matt, but she can't completely heal him. And so he's still linked to the dagger. She needs more Aes Sedai power. She needs to amplify her power with more sisters to actually fully
Need to
heal.
take him to the tower.
Yeah, this was triage. This was not a full healing here. But they then have conversations, and it turns out like all these different people have heard about the Eye of the World. So there was the Aiel who told the Tinkers, who told Perrin and Egwene. There was, I think, Rand and Matt had dreams. They've all been having dreams of this demon with fire eyes who's been taunting them in capital, as I say, in capital letters, because he's often like screaming at them in this like lounge with a fireplace and stuff. And he's just maniacal and cackling, and he's uttering all of the cliches of, you know, ruling the world and conquering the world and killing you, whatever, blah blah blah. And So ultimately, Moraine deduces, oh, all these references to the Eye of the World, the pattern's speaking to us. We have to get to the Eye of the World, which apparently they know where it is. Which I was always surprised, like, you know where this place is? Okay, whatever.
Everyone knows
It's a
where that
little
is.
contrived. I mean, the way that they get the way that they get the rationale, the reason why they go to the Eye of the World, it's a little contrived. It's a little convoluted, I think. But whatever, I don't care. I mean, I'm into the story at this point. So this is then where they go to the ways. They have to travel the ways, and they need an Ogier.
Yes.
And hey, there's an Ogier in the library.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
Will, we got you,
he's
buddy.
very congenial. He's very friendly, and he seems like he wants to help. And so he joins the pack, joins the group. And,
It's like, okay.
and thankfully there's a way gate. The ways are these ancient traveling paths. Almost like I think they're in another dimension. They're basically like wormholes, is the way I kind of think of them, because you can traverse vast distances.
It's kind of what they seem like.
Time. Yeah, but shocking, they've been corrupted.
Hey!
So,
no way.
So they're very dangerous. They're very dangerous, but they're going to do it. And they travel the ways. And they're in the ways for quite a while, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was like, it always reminded me of like Stargate. The way the ways like open, it's like a mirror. And so you walk into your own reflection. And then on the other side, everything's kind of shadowy. So I've always pictured it like, Stargate. Oh, it's just Stargate.
It kind of seems like, that's a great comparison, actually. That's a great comparison.
Yeah, which is really cool because I also love Stargate, the movie, not the TV show. But so they're on their way. They're on their way to Fall Down. I try to fit it into Viridian City because we've been talking about Pokemon this last week off air.
Quite.
I can't get there. But ultimately, they trigger Machin Shin, which is the dark wind. So we have like the dark fog, the shadow fog. This is another. I believe in the game you go to the ways too, and you can actually in the game, right? You can hear the wind like pick up.
You can, and it
close.
was so creepy. It was so good. You could hear it coming, and you're like, fuck. So you're like trying to run. You're like, no, find a gate, find a gate, find a gate.
It's consuming me. So the sequence in the books. I've been droning on now. What any thoughts on this? Did you like the whole thing, the sequence in Camelin where he meets the Queen and Elaine and Gawain and then the ways?
Yeah, I mean, it was fun. It felt like a natural flow. I kind of forgot that the Aes Sedai basically show off like parade Logain through the streets, and I was like, that's kind of a dick move. Like that's kind of like, jeez. I know why they're doing it, to be like, don't claim you're a dragon reborn, or you're gonna be this is what's gonna happen to you. Like I get why they did it, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, dude, not cool, man. No wonder everyone hates Aes Sedai. And so but I enjoyed that scene in the books, especially with like Rand interested in like seeing Logain, and just that curiosity. I think is a great little piece to the storyline. Falling into the palace, me and Elaine, okay, they had to establish meeting her, I guess. It felt a little forced and silly, in my opinion, of how that came to be, but it is what it is. I think one thing that, don't we also see a glimpse of Padan Fain as like a beggar, like following them, and he's going through the city, and he's like trying to race down Rand, and that's also kind of how Rand ends up in the palace or something like that. I don't know. But I remember he
sees him. He's still like beggar Fain, where he's kind of like a cackling,
like creepy,
swirling about
Padan
the
Fain.
city.
So I thought that was a cool continuation of that too. So I didn't mind it. I thought it felt like a good natural part of the story of them all coming together, and Moiraine kind of trying to save Matt, but being like, can't do much other than temporary patching.
Yeah, well, I think it's also important that Rand saw Logain being shown through the city, because obviously that establishes the danger lurking from the Aes Sedai if he is the Dragon Reborn, which he's clearly he must be having thoughts that he's the Dragon Reborn after everything that's been happening. And so it's building in this skepticism that I think he has for Aes Sedai generally throughout the rest of the series. So I think for that purpose, I think it was really important. and made a lot of sense. I wonder too if I don't know if this is the case or not, but if this is inspired by like Roman history, because I think a lot of Roman triumphs were like this, where after like a big battle, there would be a huge parade in the honor of the general that prevailed, and sometimes they would parade around like the conquered leader of
Yeah.
different groups and whatnot. Whether it is or not, I don't know. I think it's more important for the story that Rand sees
I could
this
see
and,
that.
starts to really question Aes Sedai and be fearful of Aes Sedai, and not see them as allies. But
Yeah.
the ways too. The other thing I liked about the ways, since we were talking about the ways, is that they find this. This is where they find out this is how the Trollocs are moving across the world.
Yep.
How they're getting from the Blight in the north, which is like the domain of the Dark One, all the way to Edmund's Field, is that they can take the ways, which then also implies there are way gates around Edmund's Field and the two rivers, which I imagine is foreshadowing that this is going to be important. And the last kind of piece of foreshadowing is Elida. I mean, he really focuses on Elida in that sequence, and this foretelling. I think it's foretelling. Hopefully, I'm not mixing up talents of Aes Sedai. That clearly is probably going to be at the forefront of Elida's mind as she goes forward in the story, assuming we see her again. Spoiler alert, we see her again in different ways. So I think that's important too.
Spoiler.
Yeah. But any other thoughts on the ways?
I mean, the ways are super cool. Again, just another super cool part of the
Which is cooler,
world building.
the ways or Shadar Logoth?
Oh, that's a good question. I almost want to say, well, I don't know. At this point, if I'm just reading the book and I'm reading about the two different cities, and the two different areas or whatever, I would say the more interesting thing at this point would probably be the ways, because there's just so much unknown about them other than this very just like dark sense to them of that, like no one travels them anymore because they're tainted by, Machin Shin. How do you pronounce that again?
I would say Machin Shin. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. That's how I pronounce it.
Mashashin, the wind.
The dark wind, that's how I pronounce it.
The dark wind.
The evil wind.
Yeah. The dark evil wind that whispers like really dark.
Isn't it always like, I want to rip the flesh off your bones?
Yeah, like I want to rip the flesh off and drink your blood and like all this stuff. And you're like, whoa, all right.
Nice.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I just think
that Trolloc cookpot was bad. Oh god.
Yeah, I think it's just because there's so much unknown about them, and then again, just the way that it's described of like these giant bridges that are like into this vast unknown, because it's just so dark you can't see. And it's like all consuming darkness, except for like your little tiny lantern. I think they're more interesting just because there's not a lot known about them. Mm-hmm. So I think that I would say they would probably be more interesting to me. That's book-wise so far.
That's how I would vote too. I also just think they're more terrifying, because it sounds like too, like Shadar Logoth. As long as if you don't touch anything or try and take anything, or talk to very slick looking.
It's like the Cave of Wonders in Aladdin.
Yeah.
Like don't touch any of the treasure. Like, you'll be okay.
In the ways, not just Machin Shin, but like I recall they would like sometimes they'd come up to like broken bridges and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you have to double.
And have to like retrace. Yeah.
And I just think also you just walk off the side on accident, because you can't. It's so dark and like suffocating. You can't see anywhere.
Yeah.
Even with your light, it's just like the little light, the orb of light around and everything is blackness. Yeah, it's just
and
terrifying.
And the idea that they had to like spend nights, but you don't know time there either. Like you don't know how much time is passing. And so also that idea is just terrifying.
Yeah.
And then there's also this killer dark wind, which you cannot fight whatsoever.
Yeah.
So
and there might be
it's
Trollocs
like,
running
okay.
around in there too. Yeah.
And maybe Trollocs. Or who else knows what else is in there? I don't know. There could be other things that live in the ways.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it's just so scary. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, it was a great, it's really cool sequence and great like world, I guess, dimension that he created. Mm-hmm. But they do, shocking, they make it out. They get through the ways, and now they're in the north. They're trying to get to the Eye of the World, which is up in the Blight, up in the north. And so they essentially are at Faldara, which is part of Shinar, a northern kingdom in this world, largely tasked with monitoring the borderlands because the Borderlands are kind of the first line of defense against the Shadow Spawn and the Dark One's forces. They are the Night's Watch of this world, in essence.
Basically, yeah.
And there's big mountain range, so it's kind of a pseudo wall. But Faldara sits at this gap in the mountains called Tarwin's Gap, and ultimately there is going to be a Trolloc horde that is going to assault Tarwin's Gap, assault Faldara. And so Faldara is kind of a high alert, and they're preparing for battle. Long story short, the group goes en masse to the Eye of the World, which is in the Blight. And so there's a sequence of going through the Blight. We see what the Blight's like, but the whole group is going, which is another deviation in the TV show. Is how they approach the final episode. But they finally get to the Eye of the World. In the book, I always got the impression it was kind of this like pristine jungle, foresty atmosphere, because there's a green man there who is in tune with nature and is kind of the gardener of the Eye of the World. And so it's this pristine place, and the Eye of the World is this pool of Sidene that's untainted. And I find out throughout the book that this is why Luce Theron went mad and all male channelers go mad, why they're so dangerous, is the Dark One touched the male half of the One Power, tainted it, and the taint is what causes men to go mad, and this is why the Reds go around trying to find them and gentle them, and why the Dragon Reborn is so dangerous.
Yeah.
But the Eye of the World is an untainted pool of Sidene. I don't believe we ever find out how that came to be, or who even put it there. This is another one of those things I think that he put in the first book and really didn't follow through, or had plans that just fell through or something. But they're not alone at the Eye of the World. The Green Man is not the only one there to meet them at the Eye of the World. Yeah.
Dun dun dun.
We have our first, our second meeting of the Forsaken. Forsaken being the 13 the 13 great channelers from Luce Theron's time who joined the Dark. And they're supposedly some of the 13 most powerful channelers that turn to the Dark, and they're like the lieutenants of the Dark One. And so the scary guy with fire eyes that we've seen this whole book in the dreams of the boys cackling in capital letters, he's one of them, which we don't find out in this book. But since you've read ahead, it's okay, I think, if we talk about it. He is a Shamael. He goes by Bauzelmon. He is seemingly the Dark One in this book, and certainly all the characters seem to think he's the Dark One. But since as first-time readers, we're not supposed to know he's the Shamael, part of the Forsaken. We think we meet this Forsaken for the first time because Agenor and Balthamel are there.
Balthamel, yeah.
Balthamel, I think. And he's in a mask, so I picture him as the Mummy from The Mummy 2. Before he's sucked all the dudes that had the Canoptic jars, he's wearing the mask. Because like so they were.
That's funny.
Some of the metaphysics of this still doesn't work, but they were literally like bound in some place, a prison for the Dark One.
Shaiol Ghul.
Yeah, but some were like bound closer to time, or like closer to the world. So I'm not sure if it's like a physical place or a physical place. But in essence, most of the Forsaken were bound so deep in this place that time didn't touch them. So they're physically the same as they were when they went in. Except for these two poor bastards. These two,
damn it, these
somehow,
poor guys.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if they were like fleeing a big blast and just got caught in like the outer cone or something of it. But they were allegedly trapped like so close to the reality of the world that they were still suffering the vestiges of time. But they all have immortality because of the Dark One's like blessing. So they are like decrepit. Balthamel, I think, has like lost a jaw or something. He doesn't talk, and that's why he's got like the mummy mask on, because he just looks horrifying. Agenor looks horrifying too. Like he looks, I think, like a skeleton with like a very thin,
very, very gross looking,
thin level layer of flesh on him or something. But he can talk, so he talks for both of them. And they confront our group at the Eye of the World, and they want the Eye of the World. They want the Sidene to become like super powerful. I believe too. I don't know if you knew this, Denny. I believe Agenor is the creator of the Trollocs. Like one of the things he did, he was like a mad scientist
I didn't know that.
in the Age of Legends, and he became kind of like a Dr. Moreau, and he created all these horrifying creatures, and the Trollocs, I believe, were one of them. Is integral to the Trolloc Wars. So there you go, a little backstory. from, I believe
I did
it's in
not know
this.
that. That's
I believe
cool.
it's in this. Yeah, the big book.
Turn my light on.
I think it says it in here, I believe. Um, hopefully I'm not incorrect about that. It's been a long time since I read about that. But anyway, a battle ensues. A one power battle.
Sure
We get a one
does.
power battle between the Forsaken and the group. The Forsaken like dispatch with our group really fast. Like Moraine
Yeah,
has
they
no
do.
chance.
They're like,
Waving their hand. There goes Nynaeve.
they're like
With
goodbye.
my other hand, there goes Lan. Lan completely useless against these two. But
Exactly.
the
They're all
Green
pretty
Man
much
is
useless.
not. The Green Man
Love the Green Man.
smokes Balthamel and like turns him into a tree. Like sacrifices himself and like uses tree power to seed Balthamel, who like sprouts like trees. He's toast.
It's badass.
Balthamel's toast. So the mummies, they took care of the mummy pretty quickly. But Agenor's left. And so Agenor chases Rand to the Pool of Sidene, and Rand basically uses the Pool of Sidene, channels, and kills Agenor. Blows him away. They're dead and gone. Which is, I think, is a great setup for all of the Forsaken, who, in my opinion, are essentially bumbling fools this entire series, and not that threatening in the end. There's a few exceptions that I won't mention because you haven't gotten to certain parts of the book. But they're very few, far between. And so these two Forsaken, gone before we got to know their names, basically. So that's not the end of the book, but before we get to the trippy end,
Oh, the
thoughts?
ending's so
What did you think of the Eye of the World? We skipped Foldar. If you want to say something about Foldar, that's fine, but I always thought that was kind of just a waypoint to get to the Eye of the World.
No, don't really have much to say there. But I think the trek through the Blight is interesting. I like hearing about that and just how that world is. Sounds really gross. I like this idea that there's like this little utopian place of like greenery with a green man. Speaks to my little fantasy heart.
So it's kind of
I
Tom
love that.
Bombadil, right? That's always what I've heard. I've thought. The little I read about Tom Bombadil, kind of that, and the Jolly Green Giant from like the green bean cans. It's all the green man.
Well, I pictured him as like an Ent, like Treebeard.
Oh, okay. Should have known.
Yeah, kind of like a knowledgeable creature that's been around for like ever, basically. Who just tends his little garden and protects like the eye of the world. I just picture him as like that little Treebeard.
They walk up and he's kind of watering this little plot of like flowers. And
He's just like playing with butterflies.
He's running by with a net as they come into the clearing.
Just this like peaceful creature, you know. Yeah, he's like, oh, it's you guys. I've been waiting for you. You're like, okay, sure. So, you know, bittersweet that he ends up passing. Poor little Treebeard. So, I mean, it was good. The battle scenes are interesting. Yeah, again, everyone's basically useless except for the Green Man. And then, of course, Rand gets some power leverage and kind of toasts. Which is kind of cool to see him come to a little bit of his power, and just like his first embracing of it was cool to read. I mean, at first, these two Forsakens make you think like they're badass. Like you're kind of like, oh, these are like evil creatures that just like came out of nowhere. But everyone knows them and kind of fears them, and they have this reputation of being kind of scary. And to see their first like interaction with them is kind of cool to see come to life.
Yeah, I will say for what they were there to, I think they served the right function in the sense that they made them seem very formidable, very scary. I mean, if Moraine has trouble just like holding them off, I mean, that really demonstrates the power. And these are, I think both of them were not two of the stronger Forsaken too. So in that sense, I think they served their function. It's just like the other Forsaken we meet are in kind of summary fashion. So jumping ahead quickly, like Dragon Reborn, I think it's Balal we meet in the Stone of Tyr, which we'll get into when we talk about the Dragon Reborn. We hear about him just like we heard about these two, but just like these two, he pops up at the very end, little skirmish, little fight, gone. And it seemed like that became kind of the Forsaken trope throughout a lot of the series. Again, with some minor, there are some exceptions to that, but on a whole, I always felt that that's how they were. And so even though I think for a first book this makes a lot of sense, I just wish he kind of fleshed out the other Forsaken a little more. But it is what it is, I suppose.
Clever.
At least we got like a one power battle at the end, because it also doesn't end
Yep.
there. Then it gets really trippy. If I can remember this correctly, this is where all of a sudden there's like a illuminated staircase leading through the netherworld or something to a door, and there's like a cord going to the door, or I think. But the door leads to the place where Basilmon was screaming at the boys throughout the book. There's the fireplace, and like Basilmon like conjures, I think, who was reputed to be his mother, and like turns her to ash or something to torment him. I think that's this scene. A lot of those dream sequences kind of blend together now. But Rand, fights him, cuts the cord that's like tied into Balzamon's back or something, and causing Balzamon to freak out and flip out. And then Rand travels to the battle, because there is a battle going on between Faldara and the Trollocs, and the Faldarans are getting just smoked. And Rand shows up with all this power and just starts lighting all these Trollocs up, and basically wins the day for the light side. But he's kind of, I think, if I remember correctly, he's like obscured in smoke and cloud and haze and light. And so like none of the Faldarans know it's him. They just see this figure arrive in grandeur and glory. Yep. Just start killing all the Trollocs. And so his secret is safe, at least from the Faldarans. And then after he lays waste to the Trolloc horde, he then goes back to the Eye of the World. He's just porting all over the place with this power. And he goes back, and Nynaeve is a wreck. She's really hurt. I think Egwene, Perrin, and Mat are relatively okay. Lan and Moraine are relatively okay. And Moraine basically tells all of them, he tells Egwene, I think, that Rand can channel. But I don't think, if I recall correctly, she doesn't tell Perrin and Mat that he can channel. I don't think.
No. Only Egwene knows.
And so they don't, I believe the book ends with them not knowing, but Egwene knowing. At least he's a channeler. We're left knowing, essentially, that he's the Dragon Reborn. And he's seemingly left knowing, he believes he's the Dragon Reborn as well by the end of this book. And so it ends, I think, with him sparring Lan, or him just like ruminating on a tower. And then Moraine listening in. She has this ability to use the one power where she can eavesdrop on people from a distance. And so she's listening to him, I think he's talking to Lan. I could be wrong about that. But then she also finishes by like basically declaring, if I remember correctly, the dragon's been reborn. And the last like two important things is at the Eye of the World, Sideen's drained. They find a dragon banner. They find a seal to the Darklands prison that's I think destroyed. Roll credits. End of Eye of the World.
Roll end of book 1.
End of book 1. There you go. Eye of the World. So, did you like the ending? Did you understand what was happening in the ending?
The ending was really confusing. I'm not gonna lie. It was pretty trippy and strange.
Yeah.
I couldn't really understand what was going on, other than he's like fighting the big bad.
Yeah.
But it was very confusing of like what exactly happened during it.
Yeah. All the Basilmon stuff was at the end was very confusing. Everything else I can make sense of. The teleporting, especially the further along you get in the series, some of that becomes a little more clear, I think. But at the time, it was like reading the prologue. I mean, I don't know what is happening here. This is other than he's having some confrontation, but I don't know where it's happening. Is it really happening? Is this in there? Is it in his head?
Yep.
It's really trippy. And thankfully, I think the last time the books are really trippy in that way. That's just outright confusing. And I think, there's always been the perspective in the fan community. This is one of the weaker endings because it doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. At least that kind of part of it.
That part of it didn't make sense. Like leading up to it with like the Forsaken and stuff, like kind of makes sense. Like they're fighting over who gets to get to it basically, and then Rand gets to it. but yeah, the whole stuff with how do you say it?
I always say Balsamon. I don't know if that's how it's
Bisalmon,
Balsamon?
Balsamon.
A Shamael. It's a Shamael.
Ishama, him, that
A
guy.
Shamael.
Yeah, after that stuff, it just gets confusing. I was like, what's going on? Wait, what's happening? He's doing what? Now he's over here?
What?
Like, and now
He's
this
just a
is
beam of
happening?
light.
What?
Hey, he's
Yeah,
back there?
wait, what a second. What? Yeah, so that was a little confusing and didn't really make sense. But,
Yeah.
it's okay. I guess.
So, a couple questions to wrap up.
Okay.
Our first video on the Wheel of Time. This is
Okay.
a book to show question. Do you prefer the Balsamon we get in the book or the Balsamon / Ashamael / Dark One that we get in the show? Or do you like them both?
Ooh, good question.
Because I have a definitive preference.
You have a
I do.
definitive. Ooh, definitive.
I can go if you want to think for a minute.
You go first.
I much prefer the show, Ashamael, show Dark One, show Balsamon. I always
Okay.
thought that the character Balsamon in the book, especially in the first book, and mainly in the first book, was very cartoonish. It didn't help that he had
Okay.
he had furnaces for eyes. I think is how it's described.
Eyes of
frequently.
fire
Yeah.
or whatever.
And
Yeah.
I could never tell if that was like a metaphor or if that was like literally he's like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat when he takes his head off and he's got like literally fires in his eye sockets. I never really grasped like what I was supposed to really take from that. And then like I said, my recollection of him is him just shouting in capital letters every time he shows up. I know that's an exaggeration, and then everything he was saying was I thought was kind of very cliche for a villain, and a dark villain, a dark one, a dark presence.
Okay.
And so he just always came across as very cartoonish, and it wasn't helped by how this iteration of him, and I won't say more, ends in the subsequent books. So I never really liked the character we got in the book. And also because he's so cartoonish, like I just couldn't take him seriously. I never thought he was that great of a threat, and so I wasn't surprised that he got defeated. In any of the times we saw him, because spoiler alert, we're gonna see him at least 2 more times here soon as we continue on.
No way.
So I much prefer the more kind of quiet, calm, subdued, more human-like iteration of him. It made him a little more cunning. It made him seem like he actually had the upper hand, like he knew things that Rand in particular doesn't know about the world and the way things work. And I always think the quieter kind of villains are more threatening and more dangerous and more terrifying than the more boisterous ones. And I think, just to kind of wrap up, I don't know if you know, do you know the history of Balsamon, like why he's like this? This is another kind of metaphysical thing. He is, and I don't think this was ever explained by Robert Jordan, he's able to, periodically through time, he gets to leave the prison. And so he's actually interacted.
Good for him.
Yeah, I don't know how he got this favored position. He got the key somewhere. I don't know, and he found the back door. Or maybe he gets like work release or something periodically. I don't know. But he is, throughout like time, he has been out and like affecting world events in different ways. But because of this, apparently this has led him to become mad. He's like crazy.
Okay.
And so when we meet him, he's the more maniacal, crazy version of the character. So from the in-world explanation, I can see where they get to it. Even with the explanation, that kind of villain just doesn't work well for me. So I much prefer what they're going with in the show. So there you go. That's my long-winded way of preferring the show version to the book version.
Okay. Very cool. I'm like, very cool. Well, I haven't even thought about it until about now, the comparisons of them, and I'm trying to think back of the moments in the book with when you encounter him. And I mean, even as you were talking about, you know, kind of the cartoonish aspect of him and just kind of being pissed all the time. Just like
He's
yelling.
always raging.
He's just always raging and just pissed. It
Maybe
does
you would
kind
be
of
too in
seem
his
like a
position.
cop
I
off.
don't know.
you're trapped and you just want to get
And these
released. I
dang
kind of
kids
get
keep
it.
ruining
Like,
all of your plans.
I suppose like fucking kids keep getting in the way. I mean, I guess in a way I'd be pretty pissed too. So I mean, maybe I could relate to that. I mean, in this instance, it didn't bother me too much in the books of how he's portrayed, in at least in this first book. I mean, he sounds like your typical kind of fantasy bad guy.
Just again, the more traditional kind of villains.
Yeah, more traditional.
Out of the Tolkien
yeah,
kind
not.
of,
Yeah, nothing super unique, but I mean, you can kind of see where he's, coming from, I guess you could say. I do think I agree that the show paints him as a more interesting, complex character. I like that kind of human quality. I think it makes him feel more sinister. So I think, and especially with the teaser of season 2 that they released.
Yeah, it was good.
And he's like the interaction with the kid, and I was like, oh, that's so creep. Oh, that's he's so not a good dude. He's so not a good dude.
And they're
like
the
that
face of the Trolloc together.
Yes, those kind of bad guys are more diabolical, in my opinion. So I think I would have to agree that at this point, having not read the entire series and don't know how he obviously evolves throughout them. What happens with him and stuff like that. I would have to say probably the show at the moment of how he's being portrayed. Just because, I mean, he works in the books, but he's not like a super unique bad guy at the moment. He's kind of like Sauron. Fire. Fiery eyes, even furnace eyes. Like Sauron was literally Sauron's eyes.
That old so-and-so.
Good old furnace eyes.
All right, so a couple more. Favorite part of the book?
Favorite part of the book. I think it was the Shadar Logoth.
For me, it's the Ways.
Parts.
The Ways sequence.
Okay, the Ways were very good. Yes.
Love Shadar Logoth. Do you have a weakest part of the book? If you had to be constructively critical of the first entry in the Wheel of Time, you have something. I can give you mine off the top of the bat. It's kind of I guess it's a nitpicky thing. And I kind of mentioned already, I thought it was a little contrived, a little convoluted how they decided to go to the Eye of the World. Just that.
Okay.
Oh, we hear all these different stories about it. The pattern must be telling us something. Maybe it's Tavir, and I don't know. Let's go. It was just as contrived, I thought, in the show. I mean, I don't think either the book or the show did a great job motivating that pushing the push towards the Eye of the World trek there. But that's an incredibly small thing. I mean, I love this book. so there are very few things I didn't
assumption
really like.
That like. And I guess, is there like an assumption that there's just like everyone knows where the Eye of the World is? Like,
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, they did that in the show too, where it's like she clearly knows where it is, and it's within,
right.
It seems like a day, maybe 2 days walk of Faldara. And in the show, it's weird because they say it. They think it's the Dark One's prison. In the book, I don't think I think Shal Ghul is the prison in the book, and like everybody knows the Eye of the World is not the prison. So that's a change that I think makes little sense. Everyone knows where his prison is, or if they think they know where his prison is. I think they're wrong in the show. But they supposedly they think they know where it is, and no one's ever done anything. Whatever. I'm not going to get into the show. It's necessarily about the show. I just want to, since we have the show, I wanted to talk about some of the overlap. But yeah. So is that one of your? Is your nitpick the Eye of the World thing, or not your nitpick? The weakest part of the book if you had to isolate one.
I definitely think it's kind of a strange miss. Like I don't understand why everyone knows where it is and everyone can go there, but no one has until now. Obviously, it's difficult to get to, but like, was it that difficult?
I thought there was something about like you can't find it twice, but you can only find it like if you need it or something. Of course, I could be wrong
there's
about
always
this.
that, right?
I've been reading so much fantasy. Maybe I'm blending rules for other magical places. I could be.
I'm sure that was thrown. There's a lot of fantasy cliches thrown in this first book. Okay, So unless your need really is justified, it will appear for you. kind of thing. Sure, why not?
So.
But I mean, that was definitely part. I think there was just, some slower parts that I was like, I don't really get the point of these things. Like the whole, like the Barrelin part I mentioned was just like, I could have done with all of that, and they could have met Min somewhere later, like in White Bridge or something,
Or
like it could have been
that.
somewhere else, or booked, or literally
or
like in a
whatever,
whole other book.
Yeah.
When she becomes more prominent, kind of thing, because they don't even really give you much from her other than that she sees some things, but then you don't hear from her for a while. So I think that was just kind of like filler, felt like filler. I think those were like kind of the two. I would agree. Those were kind of the two bigger things.
Last two questions. Favorite character at the moment? If you can remember, certainly. Obviously, you're 4 books in, so I don't know if it's changed. But if you can remember after reading this book, who your favorite character is.
Okay, I gotta try to.
Who would it be?
Remember the book. Like trying to remember, like. I think after like reading this book, I would probably say, if I had no knowledge of the rest, kind of my reactions would probably be Moiraine, just because going into it from like playing the PC games and stuff and kind of knowing the general gist, I loved the idea of like Aes Sedai, like strong women, and they're like the only women who like channel magic and are super powerful figures in the world. And you get a lot of her in this book. And just kind of see her relationship with Lan, and like just kind of give a really cool deep dive into Aes Sedai and who they are and her character in the first book. I think she would probably be my favorite.
Yeah, if I had to choose someone on the main group, I think it'd be Perrin, because Perrin's got the most going on. I'm inclined toward Matt, but Matt spends a lot of like half the book doing nothing because he's like bedridden with the dagger, the influence of the dagger.
True.
So I think I go with Perrin. I really like, and I like his interactions with Elias. Again, this is like, I love the character of Elias or Elias, or whatever his name
he's a cool
is.
character.
So I'd probably go with,
whoever you are, Wolfman.
If I didn't go with the main group, it'd be Tom. I love Tom Marilyn.
He's cool.
But
yeah,
he leaves the book
like
so
Tom.
early, so I won't go there. And then finally, do you have a rating for this out of 10? If you had a rate.
Ooh, out of 10. If I had to rate it, I would probably give it a 7.5.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I would give it an 8.
I enjoyed it.
I'm a little ahead of you. 80%. A B minus.
I think it was just, for me, it was some of the slower parts maybe, but, and then the ending was just...
Took some marks off of the ending. The confusion.
A little too off the wall, almost like he wasn't really sure how to end this first one, but he wanted to end it with a bang, but like at the same time he's like, I don't know how to end this, and then go into the second, like I just felt like it was just kind of like all over the place a little bit. So I think that's a 7.5 and an 8, so there you go. Pretty close.
Okay, well,
still pretty good though.
Oh, yeah.
Still pretty good.
Oh yeah.
Heck yeah.
And clearly not good enough to keep you reading, so since you're up to number 4.
That's true. I was still interested in reading the big books with small text.
Yeah. So, any final thoughts then, as we conclude talking about the eye of the world?
I don't think so. I should be starting the 5th book in about a month. I time them. I read 3 a year. I literally read one at the beginning, I read one in the middle, and I read one at the end.
we're gonna be doing these videos for like the next 5 years. I haven't done the math.
Pretty much.
But still okay. I mean, we at least have 3 more we can talk about before you embark on that journey, the fires of heaven.
Fires of heaven.
I'm looking forward to
Please don't tell me the slog starts yet.
You didn't want me to tell you anything, so I will not confirm nor deny. I mean to imply nothing by that. So, yeah.
Okay, great.
It's a really cool title. I mean, that's one of the things I love about the whole series. They're really cool titles, I think.
Really cool titles, and I love the older cover arts.
But you're now in like the hardbacks, right? Reading the hardbacks for everything?
I buy the hardbacks, yeah. Except for the first book, I bought these two because I thought they were nifty and different. Which I don't think they have these in hardback.
And less daunting when you crack it into 2.
I mean, yeah, I love that they did this because these are technically for young adults. They split it in to get young adults to read them, I think, more. which I can appreciate. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we probably should wrap up here as my room slowly turns into the
Yeah,
woods here. It's getting darker and darker, and I think I hear wind picking up, so I'm a little worried about that. Hopefully it's just the air conditioning unit. But before we do break, Denny, you want to tell watchers, listeners, where they can find us if they're interested in our content?
Yes, sir. You can find us at the Pop Docs Pod on Instagram, at the Pop Docs on what is now called X, I believe.
Yep.
No longer Twitter, it's X. It's so dumb. And then also on YouTube at the Pop Docs. And we do our podcast as well.
Yeah.
A little bit of anywhere and everywhere. You can get podcasts.
And just a little tease, if I get around to finishing Twisted Metal, I'm going to have an episode coming up, a podcast episode, talking Twisted Metal, among other things there. Yay! The podcast being where we talk about general pop culture. These videos more focused on specific topics, like the eye of the world. Mm-hmm. And so we will plan, and we are planning to have subsequent videos as we read through the Wheel of Time, kind of together, hopefully together, and especially hear your thoughts, Denny, as you go forward, especially with these books that you haven't read before, and get your thoughts on. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today, and I look forward to the next one, The Great Hunt, my favorite book in the series, actually. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that more. But with that, for now, the Pop Docs Clinic is officially closed.
Doodles!